Like all of the Sacramento Kings fan base, Domantas Sabonis is seeking a clear direction from the organization this offseason, and it could result in him asking for a trade. Chris Watkins from SacTown Sports 1140 joins me to talk about that, break down the possibilities, what Sabonis could possibly be seeking, and we'll talk about Taylor Jenkins being fired in Memphis. Should he be a head coach on the Kings' radar? It's all right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. Excited to welcome in my co-host for this episode, Chris Watkins from SacTown Sports 1140. He's been featured on Locked On Kings many, many times. Does phenomenal work over there on SacTown Sports. Is one of the hosts of the Return of the Roar podcast and show that they do over there that you should absolutely check out with Brennan Nunez and Frankie Cardicelli. Chris and I are going to break down the not new news that has been re-aggregated, or they've added a layer upon it of Domantas Sabonis looking for a clear direction. This is something we first found out from Sam Amick in an Athletic article a handful of weeks ago. Now, apparently, other teams are monitoring the Kings' situation to see what's going to happen and if Sabonis will ask for a trade. It's just another piece of the mess that is the Sacramento Kings right now. So Chris Watkins and I will break it down, talk about the possibility of trading Domantas Sabonis, like what clarity Sabonis could be specifically seeking, plus some thoughts on Taylor Jenkins. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Chris Watkins right here on Locked On Kings. Maybe the perfect indication of where we're at in the season was A's baseball on my screen while we were at the Kings game, and Chris Watkins playing backyard baseball on his tablet with a Kings game in front of us. That's where we've gotten to, Chris. 9 games remaining. Dear God, it's almost over, but then we'll get a week into the offseason and miss the punishment already. But we're setting up to have maybe a fiery offseason and potentially more drama carrying into next season. There's a report that I guess resurfaced today. It wasn't anything really new about Domantas Sabonis seeking clarity or wanting to seek a clear direction from this organization this offseason. And if he doesn't get the responses he wants, he could ask for a trade. Let's break this down in pieces. First and foremost, Chris, I'm joining Domantas Sabonis in wanting to see any kind of clear direction from this Sacramento Kings organization. I have no clue where the frick they're headed.
Yeah, I mean, once Sabonis gets it, please relay the message, because I think we've all been trying to figure this out for some time now. I mean, and for what it's worth, to add to it, our friend Alan Stiles just had on Brett Siegel, who kind of, like you said, I don't know what resurfaced. I guess I'll be here to tell you that I would call it re-aggregating. Like, frankly, Alan kind of asked him, like, credit to Alan, he straight up asked him, like, how is this different than what Sam Amick said probably a month ago or so? And really, I don't want to say Brett didn't properly source it or anything like that, but he kind of gave a little bit of a word salad answer and really didn't report it. And it just kind of seems like it is more speculative. And so more so like he's connecting dots, which I don't think he's wrong to do, but the way that it's kind of been ran with, I think, is having it be kind of like you framed it. Like is it a report? Is it new information? Is it really anything? To me, it just kind of seems like he's connecting dots and again, maybe he did speak to one executive out there, or, who knows, a couple executives out there, and maybe it is properly vetted. But for the most part, like, I don't think it's necessarily saying, I have heard from Domantas Sabonis' people, or I've heard directly from the Kings saying that they are shopping him. So just to kind of set the standard. Like I don't think really anything has been revealed here recently.
Yeah, I think really the main thing to take away from this is just that somewhere, some team, if not multiple teams, are just monitoring the situation in Sacramento. They're paying attention to what's going on. And like, this isn't just like, oh, we're going to see what happens. This is wolves hiding in the brush, a predator hiding in the brush, waiting to pounce when the Sacramento Kings do something stupid, or if the Sacramento Kings continue to do stupid things. This is nothing new, right? 29 other organizations and their GMs stare at the Sacramento Kings and quite often wait for something to happen to where they could possibly take advantage of it. This is one of those circumstances. We can dive into the trade value of Domantas Sabonis, how that might change, get better, get worse as this drama or this saga goes on. He's paid a crap ton of money. It's not going to be an easy contract to move. He certainly does have value around the league, as much as people want to crap on Domantas Sabonis for his skill set. He's a very, very, very good basketball player that teams would be interested in. But I mean, there's two ways to look at this. There's the Domantas Sabonis angle, which we'll get to in a second. And then there's just the reality of the Kings are, Chris, right back into this position where teams are waiting for them to implode and see if they can like pick the carcass and get what little good is left in the organization. That's just what it feels like to me, right? That's just where we're headed again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely, whether it be, them being poached, like you could say, Luke Laux or maybe Wes Wilcox. Like I just kind of feel like a lot of this offseason is going to be kind of like you said, like people are going to kind of wait to see what happens with what everyone decides here in Sacramento. Like, and I think that stretches from assistant coaches. I think maybe even to an extent, people have brought up Monty McNair. Like, obviously, should the Kings hire or fire Monty McNair, or re-sign or fire Monty McNair? Like, I've heard some people not necessarily connected anything, but people kind of ask, like, it's a two-way street. Like, does Monty McNair want to continue to be a part of this organization? And then there's the whole, this is one of 30 jobs kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, to kind of get to the root of what you're saying, I think there's going to be a ton of changes, or at least a ton of questions that are circulating Sacramento all off season. And I don't know if anybody really knows what the answer is going to be. I'm kind of really curious these next, we're in game, I think 73 or something like that. Like these next 10 games or 9 games. I'm really curious, and we're not going to get an answer until a couple months down the line, but how much of the offseason kind of depends on how these last 9 games go. Like I think a lot of people are kind of writing, seeing the writing on the wall for DeMar DeRozan this offseason. I think people, you clearly with the Sabonis reports, like you see people kind of starting to circle the wagons when it comes to figuring out what his future is going to be. It does kind of, like you said, feel like the vultures are kind of circling Sacramento a little bit, and we're going to hear, I think they're just going to be one of those teams again that's just thrown in everything. I mean, Taylor Jenkins gets fired this morning, and I don't think you could wait 5 minutes before checking social media and people automatically connecting him. I would say rightfully so, but I think it really just speaks to the amount of fluctuation that can happen this offseason. It can be GM, it can be coach, it can be coaches, assistant coaches, it can be star players, it can be Keegan Murray, your young player. Like, I think that the amount of decisions across the board that have to be made, business decisions, personal decisions, it kind of is endless. And I think it's really telling, honestly, the fact that you've already seen 2 very high profiled in the organization people in Wes Wilcox and Luke Laux already make their decision. Like, they didn't wait until the offseason. They didn't wait until things have cleared up, or until there's a clear answer of whether this team's going to the playoffs or not. Like, they just straight jump ship, and I think that's really telling of frankly, why I think people are right to assume that there's going to be some things to pick out from this mess, honestly.
Yeah, we can pretty it up as much as we want to. It's Luke Laux' dream job. Wes Wilcox has connections with the University of Utah's head coach. Like, these are guys that are abandoning ship.
Yeah, I mean, those things can still be true, and they can do that in the offseason.
They're getting off the Titanic, right? Like, this is what's been one of the most frustrating aspects of this very frustrating season is that this organization in so many ways has turned into a middle school. Like, it's just been there's been so much drama around this organization. So allow me to be TMZ and to continue pushing that drama. Like, all of a sudden, Domantas Sabonis is going to start asking the same questions and searching for and looking for the same things that De'Aaron Fox was searching for and looking for. And Fox was killed for it. Now, we don't have to go back into the weeds of everything that Fox did wrong on the way out, because nobody was right in the situation. It all was just messy. Fox got what he wanted. Yes, the way he went about it did have a negative impact on the Kings organization, but it's also a bed in a hole that the organization dug for themselves or made for themselves and put themselves in. Now Domantas Sabonis is going to start asking the same questions. My thing is, Chris, like, what? There's the safe answers. There's the, I just want to see that we're winning. I want to see that we're committed to winning, which are the things that De'Aaron said publicly. And then there's the real answers of, what do we think Domantas Sabonis is seeking? What does he need to hear? What does he want to hear to make it worth his while to play out the massive contract that he's already gotten here in Sacramento? This is a very different situation from Fox's situation, because Fox was going into the final year of his deal. So is locked up. So is it like the easiest dot that I can connect is like, is it Doug Christie? Like, we know how close Domas and Doug Christie are. If Doug Christie isn't the coach going forward, is that enough for Domas to go, then I'm not playing for another head coach? Funny enough, very similar to what Fox did with Mike Brown. Like, I don't know what kind of clarity Sabonis is looking for specifically, and what the Sacramento Kings can really do realistically this offseason to please him, other than what needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, it's loaded, and I would first and foremost just say, like, I think what you just laid out is probably the most accurate thing. Like, I would guess that it starts with that, at least, that, like you laid out. I mean, him and Domas's relationship, Doug, that is, has been well documented. I mean, from, the video of them working out with DeMar DeRozan this summer at USC, to even, I remember Sabonis' first offseason, Sabonis literally housed Leandro Barbosa and Doug Christie to work out with him the entire summer, or at least for a couple months of the summer. And I think somebody else on the Kings at that time joined them as well. But yeah, I mean, they are like real life, I won't say they're friends, but there's a real life relationship between those two. And I would imagine that absolutely that's the first thing that's going to be on his demand list, on his wish list, on his questioning, whatever you want to call it. That's definitely going to be the first thing. And then we know Sabonis likes to compete. Like, we know he wants to go out there, and at least I don't think he's necessarily going to ask, like, hey, can we build a super team here? But he's going to want to feel like, I want to go out there every night and feel like, when I get hit in the face, when I get stitches on my eye, when I, twist my ankle and then a week later come back from an injury that usually takes 2 weeks to come back from, like, I'm coming back for something. Like, I don't want to come back and have it be for a play-in situation. I don't want to scrap and fight and risk my body to be 500. Like, that just seems to be the kind of guy that Sabonis is. And, he doesn't seem to be somebody who's super demanding, but I think much like in the De'Aaron Fox situation, like, these guys have to take control over their careers. And I think it's hard for them to kind of go out there and be that open, because you do open yourself up for criticism and to be called the prima donna and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I mean, whether Sabonis is going to be super happy in this situation or not, the reality is, like you said, he's under contract for the next couple of years. And so he probably is going to want to know, if I'm going to be here for 3 years, like, what assurances do I have? You said, Matt, much like De'Aaron Fox asked, what assurances do I have that we're going to be competitive while I'm here? Because, I mean, Sabonis more than anybody is risking whatever you want to say. He is throwing his body out there every single night and giving it everything he's got. I don't think he wants to do that for a 500 team. I think he wants to mean something. And frankly, especially after that Warriors series, I still think he wants to show the national public that he's not some scrub. He is not some, guy who's just stat padding. He's somebody who has developed a 3-point shot and really can be a winning player in this league. And frankly, I mean, if he's going to be on the Kings for the next 3 years and they're going to be around 500, it's only going to exasperate that conversation. I mean, you see what it's done to guys like Zach LaVine, like DeMar DeRozan. It doesn't matter what stats you put up. If you're on a 500 team or a team that's in the play-in every year, the narrative's going to build, and it doesn't matter if you're putting up triple doubles. It doesn't matter if you're breaking Wilt's records or anything like that. People are going to call it empty calories, whether that's right or wrong.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here. The madness in full effect right now. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 in extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. You can pick your favorites, whether it's underdog still in the tournament or the juggernaut that you want to ride to the very end. You can stay involved in all of the action. There's so many games going on and everything. It's easy to track everything with FanDuel. Plus, the app is super simple to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your cash. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Well, let me ask this question. And this is coming from someone who is a total Sabonis homer and chief defender of a Domantas Sabonis fan club. Is Domantas Sabonis good enough to make demands or requests that result in another attempt at a quick fix?
I would say in general, like in a all encapsulating situation, probably not. But in this situation, I think so.
Okay.
Like, if he's the second or third best player on, whatever, the Milwaukee Bucks, at the end of the day, it's probably going to be Giannis. The same way as here, it felt like it was De'Aaron's call. But the fact that Sabonis now holds the cards of, pretty sure he's the longest tenured Sacramento King right now, if not Keegan Murray. So he's been here the longest. He gets paid the most. He's under contract for possibly as well, besides like maybe Devin Carter, the most amount of years. I kind of feel like if there is a situation where Domantas Sabonis is going to have that level of say, it would be this one, especially considering, you could say the Kings' backs are to the wall this offseason, and they kind of don't have a choice unless they're going to fully lean into the rebuild. Like if they want to be like we think they do, want to be taken seriously and like want to, continue to compete at a certain level, like I kind of think that, they have to listen to him if he's going to say to fight, because at some point here too, you are going to, I don't want to say ruin your reputation, because it feels like that's been said time after time here in Sacramento. You make certain decisions and it's just going to ruin your reputation across the league. But I don't know, man. It does feel like at some point here it's going to stick, because the Kings found success there for a couple years. And for them to pretty much openly throw it away, like, that's a little bit different than just being a really bad team year after year after year after year. That kind of messages to people, okay, like what is good enough? Like why should I go over there and feel like, my success is ultimately going to be good enough? Because clearly they've shown that even what I think a lot of people would consider successful, varying degrees, I still feel like they just, it wouldn't be super attractive to walk into that situation unless there's other factors playing into it.
Well, this isn't new. Domantas Sabonis has actually weighed in on a lot of organizational decisions over the short time that he's been here in Sacramento, from very publicly speaking out about wanting Malik Monk back to, I remember he made a public comment about I think it was after the DeMar DeRozan deal got done, where he kind of made a comment like, finally a deal actually got done after the Kings were trying some things and it never went through. Finally, we made an improvement too. Like, we don't need to beat around the bush. Like, we know Sabonis was one of the players in the camp of, hey, maybe don't bring Mike Brown back. Maybe don't sign him to an extension. Like, he was part of that group that caused the organization to hesitate. So he's already weighed in his opinion, not that he's making any demands or anything like that. But the reason why I asked the question, I just asked that to you, Chris, is because the Kings might be in a position where it's going to require time to fix the mess that they've made.
Yeah.
And I understand what you're saying completely about like the image of the organization going from the Beam team and completely like mishandling that, fumbling that to a point where then you just basically punt it 2 years later. But if Monte McNair is no longer your general manager, you don't go forward with him as your general manager. You bring in a new front office, and basically, like, you have to give them the assurances that they have the time and the ability to fix this mess.
Sure.
Like, then that front office is going to Domantas Sabonis and going like, I understand you want clarity. I understand you want to compete. Hey, if you want to be a part of this, that's great. But you need to understand, like, I got to figure these things out. Like, I got to figure out how to move DeMar DeRozan. I got to figure out what players I even want to build around. I got to figure out whether or not I'm going to have this Kevin Huerter draft or pick that was moved in the Kevin Huerter deal. Like, it makes sense if the Kings were just naturally proceeding, if we all knew Monte McNair was going to be the GM, this front office was going to be the same. It's business as usual going into this offseason and changes need to be made. I understand Sabonis saying, I need clarity. I want direction from people that I've worked with for years. But if it's a new front office coming in, I'm not saying Domas has to like fall in line, but I think he and everybody should be expecting like changes need to happen, changes need to be made, and there isn't a realistic quick fix that I think saves this team to a level that doesn't cost you all of your draft compensation going forward and feel just like another desperate home run swing.
Yeah, well, I mean, to bring it full circle, I think that's why he wants/needs to have the conversation with. And that's where things get, that's where things get a little funny, Matt, is like, who does he have that conversation with? Because if he's talking about the future of the team, I mean, that's general manager stuff. But to your point, like, if the general manager is not going to be there, then, it's almost, that in itself is almost your answer, right? Like, if you just laid it out, I mean, if you're bringing in a new GM, you almost have to assume that there is going to be some form of a rebuild. And much like De'Aaron kind of got his answer when the organization fired Mike, like, that could be the organization's way, or intentionally or unintentionally, of saying, like, look, we're bringing in a new guy. Like you just stated, it's not going to be a quick fix. And honestly, if it is going to be a quick fix, the quickest way of doing that is probably trading our best player, who at the moment is Domantas Sabonis. So I'm not saying that if the Kings hire a general manager, that definitely means Sabonis is gone. But to me, if realistically, like, you want to actually fix the problem, that, and I'm not saying Sabonis is the problem, but I more mean, like, if you want, you got to pick a side. You have to either go completely all the way in and, say, like you said, draft picks be damned. We're going to bring in somebody else who, for whatever reason, we didn't think it was De'Aaron Fox, but whoever we're trading for, we think this is going to be the guy that at least brings us to where we want to go. Or that person walks in and says, look, I'm trying to rebuild this thing. And much like, you don't bring in a GM with a coach, like, he could say, look, like, you're from a previous regime. Like, I didn't sign you to that contract. When I think about the Kings' future, I think about draft picks. I think about all the things I can do, and Sabonis is the best way of potentially doing that. And so, I'm not saying it is the answer, but I just kind of think it's just such a weird, complicated situation that I don't even know. We can start there. I don't even know who Sabonis. I guess it would be Vivek, but I don't know who even Sabonis would look to get clarity from. And, I kind of said this yesterday too to some people, like, and you, Matt, I think it was actually you. Mike Brown has had assurances in year one, and then year two comes around, and all of a sudden
it changes.
All the assurances are no longer assured. And so, they can promise a new GM all they want. They can promise Domantas Sabonis all they want. Things change crazy quick, and Taylor Jenkins just taught us that too. And I just don't know how much. If I'm Domantas Sabonis, they can tell me whatever they want. I think you himself would probably have to gauge the situation, and he should probably come up with the decision himself. Because if you're going to trust, and it's, slightly because it is specifically the Kings, but I think in general in sports, you can only take what these people tell you with a grain of salt, because, they in their heart of hearts might believe that they're telling you the truth in that moment, but things change so quickly that, word is nothing in sports, really.
Chris being my podcast point guard, dishing out the clean transition to talking about Taylor Jenkins. But before we do that, actually, I'll just put a bow on it. like the first domino to fall this offseason is the decision with the front office. Like, you cannot do anything until you decide, are we sticking with Monte McNair and finding him a new assistant GM that's hopefully not someone he competed with for the job, or are we cleaning house, starting with the front office and bringing in new basketball decision makers? Like that week, I hope we're not waiting until June to answer that question. Like, we have exit interviews at the end.
There should be a week after the season.
Yep. Exit interviews. We'll talk to everybody, including Monte McNair, and then Vivek needs to make a decision, and we proceed. Because after that, we'll just be nothing but speculation and dancing and talking ourselves in circles for months until that decision is actually made and that commitment is actually made. But like you said, things change quickly in the NBA. Taylor Jenkins fired. What's crazy is outside of Memphis, everyone's like, what in the hell are the Grizzlies
I know, it's crazy.
Inside of Memphis, it's like, about damn time. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, look, totally outside perspective. Don't watch Memphis Grizzlies basketball every day. Don't cover everything.
Check out Locked On Grizz, though.
Yeah, for sure. Check out the Locked On Grizzlies podcast for what they're saying about this move. To me, like, Taylor Jenkins is a name that absolutely should be on the Sacramento Kings radar if they have a coaching vacancy. Right, it has nothing to do with Doug Christie. Like, Doug's done a fantastic job as an interim head coach. Taylor Jenkins
due diligence. That's all it is.
Yes, due diligence. He's an option, and I understand. It sounds like he lost the locker room. It sounds like he had issues with players there in Memphis. He also wins freaking basketball games. He's been very, very successful, with the exception of when John Morant got suspended for brandishing guns on social media multiple times. Like, Taylor Jenkins wins basketball games. So he definitely brings kind of a style that probably wouldn't work for this roster in Sacramento, but I'm also not too interested in this roster in Sacramento long term. So Taylor Jenkins is absolutely someone that I would have my eye on from the Kings perspective. We should hopefully find out more and hear a little bit more about what happened in Memphis. It's not like a decision you make tomorrow, like when Vlade hired Luke Walton as soon as he became available. But like, I'm definitely interested in Taylor Jenkins, at least having that conversation here in Sacramento.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you know, to continue the conversation we were just having, like, if you're going to bring in a new GM and you are going to rebuild from scratch, to me, Taylor Jenkins is the perfect kind of guy to bring in. I mean, especially you look at what he did with that Memphis team last year, like, that was so depleted. I might have the number wrong, but it really brings home the point. Like, I believe it was 33 different lineups the Memphis Grizzlies rolled out last year.
Crazy.
And they had a top 15 defense. I can't remember exactly where they finished in the standings. But you know, they had a much better season than they ever should have had. And it was essentially with a bunch of two-way guys, with a bunch of, like a guy like Scottie Pippen Jr. and things like that. Like, I just think he's done a great job of at least getting the most out of the talent he has. And, you know, there's definitely an argument that, I guess, you know, even if you are going to continue to, you know, have Sabonis and try and, to be a successful team, like, maybe Taylor Jenkins is still the right guy. But for me, specifically, if you're going to lean into a youth movement, Taylor Jenkins seems like the perfect kind of guy to get the most out of an Isaac Jones. Maybe there's more to squeeze out of a Keon Ellis, Keegan Murray. Maybe he can figure something out to kind of even more expand Keegan's game. To me, Taylor Jenkins is a really good coach to try and get the most out of a minimized roster. And frankly, I know with kind of the star power right now, it might not seem like that, but I do kind of think if the Kings are going to trade DeRozan, if they are going to maybe continue with the Zach LaVine experiment, like, I do kind of think that maybe getting a guy like Taylor Jenkins who kind of thinks a little bit outside the box as well, like, I think that might be something welcome. I'm not saying it's the perfect answer. I'm not even saying it's going to be a better answer than Doug Christie, but I just think kind of to the point, like, I think you have to at least kick the tires and look into the Memphis situation of maybe why he was let go. Because if it is just a kind of disagreement amongst players, like, I think if you get a young group that he can kind of mold, to me, that feels like a really good situation for him to land in.
Yeah, I mean, coaches that have Jenkins' style can find the right group to respond to it. I mean, look at Ime Udoka. Ime Udoka is a very abrasive,
100%.
get in your face type coach, but he's built a roster in Houston, or specifically Houston's built a roster around him that embraces that style and plays that way on the floor. So maybe these guys in Sacramento wouldn't respond well to that. And I've spoken openly about how I think Mike Brown took too much of the blame for some of these guys not responding to him when maybe they should have. Like, maybe they should have been willing to be held accountable more here in Sacramento. So, I mean, we always blame the coach for losing a locker room, but why do we just give the locker room the pass for not wanting to, like, follow a coach who holds them accountable, but is winning basketball games and does things the right way? I know it's a power dynamic that gets all sort of messy in a players' league in the NBA, but Chris, we'll wrap up with this while talking about Doug Christie too. I'm curious your opinion on this, because I've shared this a lot on Locked On Kings. My only hesitation with Doug Christie as my head coach going forward has nothing to do with Doug Christie. It just has everything to do with the direction of the Sacramento Kings. My concern with Doug Christie being the head coach is that if you force Doug Christie upon whatever new front office you bring in here, if you do indeed bring in a new front office, which is what I think needs to happen. So basically, what I believe needs to happen for the Kings does not include Doug Christie. And it's not because of Doug. Again, it's because you need a new front office and you need to empower them to build their own group, hire their own coach, do everything and get out of the way, unlike what you've done before with both Luke Walton for Monty McNair and Michael Malone with Pete D'Alessandro. So that's where I feel about the Doug Christie situation. But I'm curious, like, are you to the point where Doug deserves it regardless of the situation, give him the head coach job, or do you have hesitations?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I think what you laid out there is definitely just really really well said. I mean, I think that's it's just such a complicated situation. Like it really is. Like it's we've just been through that exact hire GM, already have the coach in place, and we've seen how it plays out multiple times. I mean, it just feels like it's doomed to fail from day one. It feels like that causes a ton of politics behind the scenes, where it's this camp and more times than not, the coach is going to end up losing because the GM's ultimately the one that makes the decision. He's the one that's hired the most recently. I personally fall on the side of I want to see who the best possible coaching candidate is for this team. Like, I don't want to give it to Doug just because he is a Sacramento legend, just because, frankly, and it does need to be said, like, I kind of don't care record-wise in terms of Doug's, legacy, I guess you could say. I think he's done much better than what I don't even want to put a percent, what pretty much I could imagine anybody doing with this situation. Like, to kind of take over a pretty chaotic not locker room, but, obviously after Mike Brown gets fired, again, politics. There's this side, at least in the no pun intended, in the interim, kind of kept that group together. They went on the winning streak. Then to lose De'Aaron Fox, obviously things haven't gone great since then, but to even still have this group not feel like they've quit on each other, not feel like they're going out there and just laying eggs, like, they're still fighting out there, even though it is for a play-in spot, and a lot of these guys have vocalized they don't love the play-in. Like, I do feel like some of these guys, if you ask them in the offseason when the season isn't going on, like, would you rather make the play-in or just not make it at all? Like, these guys really, really hate the play-in tournament. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I feel like they're going to look at Doug first. I just think it makes the most sense. I think when you already have Mike Brown let go and you're already paying him, to me, if I'm Vivek, if I'm running a business, the first thing I'm telling the people who make the decision, or if it is Vivek making the decision, I'm saying, let me look at the cheapest option first. Let me see if I can get by with the cheapest option. And that more than likely is going to be Doug. And if I feel like I can get away with what I want to with that, knowing that, hey, maybe we can go a little cheap on coach, but we'll make sure to, get him a little bit more talent, whatever it is. I just feel like they're going to look at the cheapest option first. And then if they don't feel like that's necessarily 100% what they want, that's maybe where they'll open it up. I feel like more than likely, and I've been leaning this really since he took it, I just feel like I don't know how they don't give it to Doug. Like, just because I feel like, and maybe I'm not too close to the situation, but I don't know. It's always felt like this organization has had obviously an infatuation with the early 2000s Kings, but I don't know if they would want to not mess up the good. I don't really know how to say it, but it just feels like if you let go of Doug, like, I mean, they let go of Doug. Like, it's like you can't then bring him back as an assistant coach, which is also part of the mess of making him the interim head coach as well. It's like, it's really tough to, much like we're seeing with Vlade right now, not to mix all these storylines together, but it's like he's already done it. He's already been in that spot. To bring him back in a different job would just, from a messaging standpoint, I think would be really, really strange. So I don't know. I don't know if I even answered your question, but it's just such a weird situation that, to me, it feels like Doug just feels like that's where we've been going this entire time. It would be really strange, though I guess it wouldn't be off brand or off character. It would just be really strange for them to bring Doug up, essentially, be a sacrificial lamb to finish the season, and then say, "Hey, thanks for cleaning that mess up for us. That could have been really, really nasty. We're gonna go with Taylor Jenkins," and just buy, because that's also the crazy part. Again, I can't imagine if let's just run the hypothetical. They bring in Taylor Jenkins, are they going to tell Taylor Jenkins, "Hey, can you bring Doug back as one of your assistants?"
Yeah, problem.
That's problematic. It's not out of the question because it feels like something this organization would do, but
they did it.
It's just a weird situation. Again, I just know and maybe they'll do the cliche, "Hey, Doug's moved on to the barn out of state," right? "Hey, we gave him a corner office in the front office and he's going to be an advisor," or whatever. But it just would feel really weird to me if, after everything Doug has been through, he sat on the bench for Luke Walton, for Mike Brown, for all those years, and then to essentially just, say, "Hey, we're going to go with a different coach." It just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like that's the direction we're going.
There's no better way to answer that question, because it's just a mess. It's just
good, because I felt like a mess of answers.
No, that's what it is. That's what this summer is going to be. It's going to be cleaning up a mess. And are you going to get are the guys currently have the brooms? Are they going to be the ones trusted to do it, or are you going to bring in new janitors to clean it up? That's the question of this offseason. It's just a mess.
Outdoor uniforms.
It's a very messy situation. So we'll see.
Yeah. I would also like to apologize to your listeners, Matt. I feel like I can't listen to every Locked On, but I feel like every time I come on, it feels like people bash us for being negative. And this was
another
Are
we wrong
that you and I have had. So
I mean, we got killed when Doug was on that win streak, and we were saying, "Hey, I mean, come on." Hey, let's calm down. And we don't want to be right. It's just what we're seeing in and out around the organization. So, hey, we'll tell it like it is. If they're mad at us in the comments, they're going to be playing mad over the summertime too.
Yeah.
Chris, I appreciate you, man. Thanks
Anytime.
saying thanks for doing this. And we'll revisit everything during what's supposed to be a interesting summer, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Thank you for having me on. And somehow Pablo Sanchez, underrated. Underrated.
If the Kings could find a Pablo Sanchez, it's the GOAT. It's the GOAT. Backyard baseball. Go play backyard baseball. That's the takeaway from this podcast. Go and play backyard baseball.
Yeah. You'll have a good time.